Hey everybody, I was getting ready to go out and make a run for the Woodward Dream Cruise with my 69 Mustang 428 Cobra Jet. And it's a pretty good car, it's a pretty reliable car. Things don't break very often. But this is the second year in a row that my Mustang has not made it to the Dream Cruise. And I haven't posted the video yet. It's been sitting on my computer for almost a year. But last year, 2023's Dream Cruise, the rear brakes had started to develop a leak in the wheel cylinders, and so I went through the brake system. It was time, the car's getting old. It'd been a number of years, so I went through the brake system, got it all set, and the night before the cruise, I was trying to burnish the brakes in and get them running, and something went wrong. It started pulling real bad. I had somehow made a mistake, and something wasn't right. And so I put the car back in the garage and took the Camaro to the cruise. It's nice having two cars to be able to do that with. But anyway, so it didn't make it. So this year, I was trying to get the Mustang out, and the weather wasn't really good, but I figured I'd get there was a nice sunny afternoon on Thursday. I was going to get a preliminary run out in. And as I was backing the Mustang out of the garage, it's manual steering, with a high ratio, what do they call it? Competition gear, I think. As I was cranking the wheel over hard, backing out of the garage, I heard something go pop. And I felt the pop in the steering wheel. And then as I straightened the wheel back the other way to go forward, it popped again, and pretty good noise. And I stopped and I opened the hood. I looked at the linkages, I looked at the steering box and stuff, everything I could see under hood, and I didn't see anything wrong. So I headed on down the driveway, and when I got down to the street, it was pretty obvious what the matter was. It was I had a huge amount of play in the steering wheel, and it was like I could go about 90 degrees before anything happened, and even then it was close to 180 degrees of free play in the wheel. And so I went down the street and made a U-ey and put her back in the garage and started checking things out. And if you go in under hood and grab the what they call the rag joint, right, the flex coupling to the steering column, I could rotate it about 45 degrees of free play before it touched anything, I'll call it, before it would start to even wiggle the pitman arm. And if you really wanted to steer, you had to go a lot further than that before it would take any load, appreciable load that would let you steer. So 45 degrees of play in the box popping up in an instant is not a good thing. So I spent the last couple days pulling the box out, and on a 428 car, it's a challenge. Now, I told you I already had the brakes apart. I didn't really want to take them apart again. You can, at least my memory is that I can take it out the top, but you got to pull at least the master cylinder out and maybe even the brake booster to get enough clearance to bring the steering gear out the top. The service manual says you can take it out the bottom. And you can, but on a car like this, you need enough clearance. So had to take off the exhaust on both sides and basically the entire exhaust system is now on the floor. I've got a floor jack underneath the mufflers, and I've lowered it down, but you had to drop it off the manifolds and move it over. I had to take out the clutch linkage, the entire clutch linkage, all the brackets, both sides. There's a bracket on the frame rail, there's a bracket that mounts to the engine. I had to take both of those out. And then disconnect everything. Pitman arm, I've got a pitman arm puller, so I got it all pulled apart. And the gear's sitting right here. And what I thought I would do this morning is, I'll probably have somebody do a rebuild on it. I'll probably send it out. But I'd kind of like to see if I can figure out what the main issue is and understand what it is before I try to get, see how bad it's broken. I actually have I won't call it a spare box. When the car was when I first bought it over 40 years ago, the steering box, it didn't have the right tag on it. Even though it felt like the ratio was about right, it didn't have the right tag. And when I checked it out, the grease seemed to have some metallics in it, which didn't look good. And in those days, you know, there was a slew of them in wrecking yards. And on these cars, this is the high ratio, the 16:1 low numerical high effort box that they call competition box, I think, in the specs. It's the same box with a different tag that the power steering cars get. So I went out to the salvage yard, got a power steering box. It's an SMB-K, and got one of those boxes and put it in this car, and the other one I've tucked away for years. But it may be a source of spare parts, depending on how broken this one is. Maybe there's something we can salvage out of the other one. But for now, what I'm going to try to do is pull the top cover off of here and see if I can get that opened up and see if I can figure out what's broken. You know, did I break a gear? Did the ball return guides bust or break a bearing? It would just, I mean, there's a lot of free play in this dude. So that's my plan. We're going to go at it here in just a moment. Well, first of all, let's see how it rolls over here. I do have this flex joint loose. Feels kind of rough right now, but I can go all the way around. Let's see what we get here. So there's a half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. I'm a little past 4 turns, 4 1/8 or something. And given the amount of slack I've got in the box, that probably makes sense. I'll say, if you ever work on one of these things, I had a problem once where this there's a bolt that goes in here, comes in from one side, and it's a 12-point head. It's a really high strength fastener, and over the years it backed out. It got loose, and it loosened up enough that the spline actually popped over. And fortunately, again, it happened when I was backing out of the garage, because that's the worst thing. I have a 90-degree driveway here, so you got to take it over to full lock as you're backing out of the garage with, you know, the car barely moving. So there's a lot of load that goes into it. And even now, it doesn't want to come off the spline. The splines are not perfect. I'll get it off, but so the book says to go one. Make sure I do this right. The book says to go about 3 turns away from the center. Well, before I do, let me go across again. See, it feels pretty good, but I can go all the way across and I don't feel any, I'll call it the high point of the gear anymore. So the book says go half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. It says to go 3 turns from either end, and to get it, I think, to get it away from the high point of the gear. Then we got these 1/2-inch bolts, and let's pop these guys open. Part of me wants to tighten up that nut just to see if it would tighten up, but I'm going to go this way for now. And before I try to pull this apart, I just want to wipe all the gunk off of the bottom of the shaft where the pitman arm goes, because essentially what should happen here is that I should be able to pull the shaft and the gear right out the top with this cover. So let's see how we do. Let's see what we got. And there's the bolt and the shim. This is the adjusting bolt, and you've got to do that one correctly. Oop. Is that the... Well, I don't know. That looks kind of wide, but maybe that's normal. Well, it doesn't want to come apart. I think the gear needs to be... I need to come back a ways. Yeah, the gear won't come through unless I'm there. There it goes. So basically I'm just going to wipe down what I can and see if I can see anything amiss. One thing I noticed that you can't really see, but the bottom needle bearing has come apart. All the needles are falling out the bottom, which by itself is probably not a big deal, but a concern. I mean, normally you would expect that bearing to hold itself together, but perhaps in its worn condition it won't. Okay, so I've found the problem, and let me explain a little bit. The way this box works is that this shaft with the gear on it goes down inside like so, and that gear meshes with this gear in here. So when you turn the wheel, this rack rolls back and forth on some ball bearings, and then it turns this shaft. The gears are together. This little bolt in the top, which you generally should never try to adjust, but that is the adjustment for free play in the shaft. There's a special procedure you need to use. So this shaft right here, so it has a top needle bearing and a bottom needle bearing that take all the load when you're steering. And what happened was, you can see all the needle bearings here out on the paper. They all fell apart when I took it apart. But if you look at this one right here, it's broken. So this roller has broken into two pieces. Right there you can see the fracture surface, and then here is part of the race. So when this broke, this race fractured and broke, and it's the bottom one. Let me see if I can get you a good picture. It's hard to see, but this is where the bearing goes right here. And down on the bottom, now it's kind of hard to get the light just right, but so this is the upper bearing, and this is the race. You can see the edge of it right there. And down in the bottom, right in here, there's that piece is missing out of the bottom of that needle bearing. There's a section of the lower race, the lip that broke out right through there. It's very hard to see because it's hard to get enough light in there. But when that opened up, then the rollers, then all these rollers, once that broke, the rollers could all slide out and drop down into the cavity down at the bottom, drop into the cavity down in the bottom there, you know, all the way down in here. Once the rollers dropped down, then this shaft wasn't supported anymore, and this gear was starting to come out of, was coming out of mesh with the rack. Wow, what a mess. Okay, well, understanding that, I'm going to call the steering box rebuild folks and see what it takes to get it sent in and repaired, get it rebuilt. I mean, it'll need new bearings, and hopefully everything is that there's not excessive wear on anything else. But boy, that missing piece of bearing race is a big deal. Never would have figured, but you know, you get the light just right. You see, there's where the bearing is still there, and there, right above it, is where it's missing. So, well, I decided I'm going to take one more thing before I send it back. I don't have a wrench big enough to get this nut off, so I did drive it loose, this lock nut with a punch and a hammer. But now that turns, so I just want to get a look at things and see if everything else, I'll say, looks okay. Just to get an idea where I'm at. Bring out my big honker that was a 1/4 inch short or so of getting on that lock nut. And it's way overkill probably for what I'm doing here, but let's see what we can do here. There it goes. So we're just going to get a look and see what we're dealing with here. I mostly just want to see if the shaft is in good condition. And if the bearings are in good condition. I mean, that gear's been in there for 40 years, you know. And so there's the bearing for that end. So I'm going to say is this one looks okay to me. There's a ball track there, but it's not spalled or scored or anything like that. And the bearing itself looks okay. I mean, they'll put new ones in when I get it rebuilt, but I don't see anything wrong with that. The ball race looks okay. Now they tell you in the book not to bang this gear from end to end, you know, up against the end. You want to be careful with this ball screw so that it doesn't get damaged. And there's a ball bearing in the bottom end also. And that one, again, has some polish on it, but it doesn't look bad. And then I want to get a look here at the ball screw. So this is what they call a recirculating ball design. And these balls, there are balls inside these guides, and the balls roll in these grooves and take the friction out between this gear and this ball screw. And so it turns nice and easy, and it feels good. So I'm going to roll this to the end and wipe the, I mean, not hard to the end because I don't want to damage things, but let's wipe down the ball screw and see if we can get a good look at it. And I guess the good news is that, you know, with it nice and clean, I don't see any damage to the balls, to the screw here. And it feels good. And you can kind of feel the balls roll, but it feels okay. So I think that's probably usable, and There are some wear marks. There's some wear on the teeth, which you'd kind of expect after all these years. But they don't look bad either. So I think I have a rebuildable gear. The one thing that I'm most worried about, but I think would still be okay, is just that there's a couple of Brunel marks from when the bearing broke. There's a little bit of an indentation there that I can feel that probably needs to get polished out or stoned. I mean, it would be better to replace the shaft. So I think if it was cleaned up slightly, it would probably be fine. So I think we're probably in good shape. All right, well, I need to contact the shop and decide who I'm going to send this to and get it shipped off so I can get it repaired and back. I don't have a press and I don't have the right tools and fixtures to push those bearings in and out and to set the preload and everything on here, so for right now I'm going to rely on somebody else to build it for me. All right, that's all for now.